Close your eyes for just a moment. Imagine a city. A real city. Streets laid out in perfect grids. Clean drinking water flowing through pipes beneath your feet. Public baths. Covered drains. Garbage collection. Tens of thousands of people living, working, trading. Children playing in courtyards. Merchants weighing grain on perfect standardized scales. Now imagine that one day, without warning, without explanation, every single one of those people is gone. No war destroyed them. No volcano buried them. No flood washed them away. They simply vanished. And the most terrifying part? This is not a legend. This is not mythology. This actually happened. 4,000 years ago, the most advanced civilization on the planet simply stopped existing. And to this day, nobody knows why. Who were these people? How did they build a city that modern engineers still struggle to fully explain? Why did they leave no palaces, no kings, no weapons of war, when every other ancient civilization was obsessed with all three? How did 5 million people spread across an area larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined just disappear? And why, after 100 years of excavation, can we still not read a single word they ever wrote? These are not small questions. These are the questions that keep archaeologists awake at night. And today we are going to chase every single one of them. But before we go further, if you love diving into history's deepest unsolved mysteries, mysteries that textbooks are too afraid to touch, hit subscribe right now. Because we do this every single week. And you do not want to miss what is coming next. Chapter 1. The Discovery That Changed Everything. The year is 1920. British India. A railway construction crew is laying tracks through the dusty plains of what is now Pakistan. They need ballast, broken stone and brick to pack beneath the railway ties. And conveniently, there are old bricks scattered everywhere across this flat, featureless landscape. The workers begin digging. Hauling out bricks. Thousands of them. Perfectly fired. Perfectly uniform. Clearly very, very old. Nobody asks where the bricks came from. Nobody wonders what they once belonged to. They just keep digging. Keep building. Keep laying track. They were, without knowing it, dismantling one of the greatest cities the ancient world had ever produced. Brick by brick. Dumped as railway ballast. It was only in 1921 that archaeologist Daya Ram Sani stopped, looked properly, and realized what was beneath his feet was something extraordinary. He had found Harappa. And a year later, just 600 kilometers away, another archaeologist would find its twin, a city called Mohenjo-daro, meaning, Mound of the Dead. Together, they were the twin hearts of something archaeologists would call the Indus Valley Civilization. And the world would never look at ancient history the same way again. Because what they found beneath that Pakistani dust was not a primitive village. It was not a rough collection of mud huts. It was a fully planned, architecturally sophisticated, densely populated metropolis. One that had been thriving for over 1,000 years before anyone in Europe had learned to write. And it had vanished. Completely. Without a trace of explanation. That question, the question of why, would consume the next 100 years of archaeology. Chapter 2. The City That Should Not Have Existed. To understand why the disappearance of the Indus Valley Civilization is so deeply unsettling, you first need to understand what it actually was. At its peak, roughly 2500 BCE, the Indus Valley Civilization stretched across 1.5 million square kilometers. Larger than Western Europe. Larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. It had over 1,000 known settlements. Its two great cities, Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, each housed between 30,000 and 80,000 people at a time when most of the world lived in scattered farming villages. But the sheer size is not what makes it remarkable. It is what they built, and how they built it, that still leaves modern engineers genuinely speechless. Mohenjo-daro was laid out on a precise grid system. Streets running perfectly north to south, east to west. Intersections at near-perfect right angles. Every major building was constructed from standardized fired bricks. Not rough stones. Not dried mud. Kiln-fired bricks, in a ratio of 1 to 2 to 4, the same ratio that modern structural engineers still recommend today. Beneath the streets ran a covered drainage system, a sewer network, that was not matched anywhere in the world for another 2,000 years. Not in Greece. Not in Rome. Nowhere. Every house, not just the wealthy ones, every house had access to fresh water and sanitation. That is not a luxury feature. That is a social policy. A government decision. Equality built into the very foundations of the city. There was a great bath, a massive watertight public pool at the center of the city, lined with bitumen sealant, fed by fresh water, drained by its own outflow channel. Nobody fully understands its purpose. Ritual cleansing, perhaps. A symbol of civic pride. There were granaries large enough to feed the entire city for months. There were craft workshops, for copper, shell jewelry, terracotta figures, and a material the rest of the ancient world would not discover for another 1,000 years, bronze. And then there are the weights. Perfectly cubical stone weights, found across every single site in the Indus Valley, all conforming to the exact same measurement system. A standardized system of weights and measures, used across 1.5 million square kilometers of territory. Think about what that means. It means centralized administration. It means trade regulation. It means someone, somewhere, was enforcing standards across an empire-sized territory. Without, apparently, an emperor. Because here is the thing that makes the Indus Valley Civilization unlike every other ancient civilization we know of. There are no palaces. No temples to royal gods. No massive royal tombs. In Egypt, the pharaoh's face is everywhere, carved in stone, painted on walls, immortalized in gold. In Mesopotamia, kings erected towering ziggurats to announce their power to the heavens. In the Indus Valley? Nothing. No king's face. No ruler's name. No throne room. No monument to power. Just city. Just people. Just life. Archaeologists call this one of the great mysteries of the ancient world. How do you administer a civilization of 5 million people, across a territory larger than Europe, with no apparent central authority? Some scholars now believe it may have been the world's first democracy. Not a Greek democracy of citizens and slaves, but something older and stranger. A civic society organized around shared infrastructure rather than royal power. Whatever it was, it worked. For over 700 years, this civilization thrived in remarkable stability. No evidence of major warfare. No mass destruction layers. Just steady, prosperous, sophisticated urban life. And then, around 1900 BCE, it ended. Chapter 3, The Evidence Left Behind. When archaeologists began carefully excavating the upper layers of Mohenjo-daro, the layers representing the civilization's final years, they found something deeply disturbing. The quality of construction was declining. Bricks were less uniform. Drainage channels were clogging and not being repaired. Buildings were being subdivided, large civic spaces broken up into smaller, poorer dwellings. This was not a city struck suddenly by catastrophe. This was a city in slow decline. A city where something, some pressure, some crisis, was gradually wearing the people down. And then, in the final occupation layers, archaeologists found the skeletons. 37 skeletons in total, scattered across the upper city of Mohenjo-daro. Some in the street. Some in rooms. Some apparently mid-movement, as if they had simply stopped, mid-stride, and fallen. For decades, this was held up as evidence of a final massacre, proof that a conquering army had swept through the city and killed its last inhabitants where they stood. This theory had a name. The Aryan invasion theory. It claimed that incoming Indo-Aryan peoples swept down from Central Asia, destroyed the Indus cities, and replaced them with Vedic civilization. It was a neat story. A satisfying story. A story with a villain, a victim, and a clear historical turning point. There was just one problem. It was almost certainly wrong. Modern forensic analysis of those 37 skeletons found no evidence of battle wounds. No sword cuts. No arrowheads. No signs of violent trauma consistent with warfare. The skeletons showed signs of disease, of malnutrition, of infection, of a population already weakened before whatever final event claimed them. And crucially, 37 skeletons is not a massacre. It is barely a footnote. A city of 80,000 people does not vanish because 37 people died in the streets. So what did happen? What force was strong enough, and slow enough, to drain the life out of the most sophisticated urban civilization on Earth? Archaeologists began looking elsewhere. Not at weapons or bones, but at something far more fundamental. Something no civilization, no matter how advanced, can survive without. Water. Chapter 4, The Theories That Keep Changing. The Indus Valley Civilization was built on rivers. The industry. The Gagar-Hakra. A vast network of seasonal rivers and monsoon-fed waterways that made the land extraordinarily fertile. In 2012, a team of geologists and climate scientists published a landmark study. Using satellite imagery, sediment analysis, and ancient river mapping, they traced what had happened to those rivers. The monsoons had shifted. Not dramatically. Not in a single catastrophic storm. But over decades, the seasonal rains that had fed the Indus heartland began pulling eastward, toward the Ganges plain. Rivers weakened. Some dried completely. The Gagar-Hakra, once possibly the great Sarasvati River of Vedic tradition, shrank from a mighty waterway to a seasonal trickle. Without reliable flooding, crops failed. Without crops, cities could not feed their populations. Without food, the great urban centers, which could only exist because of agricultural surplus, began to empty. People did not die all at once. They left. Slowly, family by family, village by village, the western cities were abandoned as populations migrated eastward, following the retreating rains toward the Ganges. This is now the leading theory, and it fits the archaeological evidence remarkably well. The slow building decline, the maintenance failures, the gradual emptying of the great cities. But it raises its own set of questions. Because climate change does not explain everything. It does not explain why the Indus script was abandoned, why the standardized weights disappeared, why the entire cultural and intellectual framework of the civilization simply did not survive the migration east. Other civilizations have survived climate catastrophes. Egypt survived droughts. Mesopotamia survived floods. They adapted, rebuilt, preserved their knowledge, and continued. The Indus Valley Civilization did none of those things. It did not contract and survive. It dissolved. And the people who came after, in the same land generations later, seemed to have no memory of what had come before. How do you lose the memory of a civilization that housed 5 million people? How do you forget that your ancestors built the world's first sewage system? Some researchers have proposed a second factor, epidemic disease. A pathogen, perhaps carried along trade routes from Central Asia or the Persian Gulf, sweeping through densely populated urban centers with no immunological resistance. Ancient DNA studies are now beginning to map disease patterns in Indus Valley skeletal remains. The results are still emerging. But early data suggests elevated stress markers, nutritional deficiency, and possible infection signatures in the final population layers. A third theory points to internal collapse, social fragmentation. A civilization that ran on shared civic values, on voluntary cooperation, on the invisible social contract of the grid city, may have simply lost faith in itself. When the rains failed and the crops thinned, when the trade networks frayed and the granaries emptied, the social trust that held the cities together may have evaporated along with the river water. No king to command loyalty. No god-emperor to rally around. No military to enforce order. Just a civic society facing a crisis it had never been designed to survive. The truth is almost certainly a combination of all three. Climate shift triggering agricultural collapse. Agricultural collapse triggering migration and social fragmentation. Fragmentation opening the door to disease and cultural dissolution. A perfect storm, 3,000 years before the concept of a perfect storm existed. Chapter 5, The Secret They Never Shared. Of all the mysteries the Indus Valley Civilization left behind, perhaps the most haunting is this. We have found over 4,000 inscribed objects, seals, tablets, pottery, all covered in their writing. And we cannot read a single word. The Indus script contains around 400 distinct signs. It runs right to left. It appears on small square seals, on clay tablets, on copper tools, on the walls of buildings. It was clearly a sophisticated writing system, used for trade, administration, possibly religion. But it has resisted every attempt at decipherment for 100 years. Why? Because we have no Rosetta Stone. No bilingual inscription that links the Indus script to any known language. We have nothing to compare it against. Dozens of scholars have claimed to have cracked it. Computer scientists have run it through algorithmic analysis. Linguists have mapped it against every known ancient language family. Nothing. Every claimed decipherment has fallen apart under scrutiny. The script sits there, on thousands of objects, staring back at us and says nothing. What is written on those seals? Trade records? Religious hymns? The names of their leaders, the leaders whose faces we have never found carved in stone? We do not know. And that silence, the silence of 4,000 inscribed objects that refuse to speak, may be the most powerful symbol of this civilization's mystery. They built for permanence. They planned for the future. They standardized, systemized, and engineered a world that should have lasted for millennia. And then they left, taking their language, and perhaps everything it contained, with them into silence. Closing. Here is what I want you to sit with for a moment. The people of the Indus Valley were not a distant, alien civilization. They were human beings, like you and me, who wanted clean water, safe homes, and fair weights in the marketplace. They built a society based not on the glory of a king, not on the fear of a god-emperor, but on the simple, radical idea that a city should work for everyone who lives in it. That idea, that ordinary revolutionary idea, is still the idea that every modern democracy is still trying to figure out. They were figuring it out 5,000 years ago. And they almost made it work. For 700 years they almost made it work. The rains failed them. The rivers left them. Perhaps their society, built on trust rather than force, could not survive what came next. But here is what did survive. The memory of it. Buried under Pakistani dust for 3,500 years, until a railway crew and an archaeologist pulled it back into the light. This is not just ancient history. This is the story of what humans are capable of, and how fragile that capability truly is. When the rains fail, when the rivers shift, when the social trust that holds a civilization together begins to crack, it can happen to anyone. It happened to them. So here is the question I want to leave you with, and I genuinely want your answer in the comments below. If the Indus Valley Civilization had survived, if the rains had held, if the rivers had stayed, where would humanity be right now? How different would this world look? Tell me what you think. The best answers are going to end up in part 2 of this series, because we are not done with this story. Not even close. If this video made you think, made you feel something, made you see ancient history differently, please share it with one person who needs to see it. Like the video. Subscribe to the channel. And I will see you in the next one, where we go even deeper into the world that history forgot.